What is up, YouTube? Welcome to the first of my weekly Q&A series where I answer your training questions. Let's get right into it. First question, what are my top goals for all time, not just dunking, but overall? I have a lot of goals. I have life goals like getting married and having kids, of course. I have goals for my Instagram page. I would love to get to 500,000 Instagram followers within the next 5 or 6 years or so. I want to officially touch 12 feet. I've touched 11:10 twice now. I think I've had jumping days where I could have touched 12 feet. I just didn't have a vertec there to test, so I want to touch 12 feet. I want to eventually test a vertical between 42 and 44. I want to run at least a sub 4.8, if not sub 4.740. Those are a few of my goals. I would love to hit 10 meters per second in a flying 10. Do you find anything valuable from GOTA still? No, not really. When I was doing GOTA a lot in college, it did help with some of my mobility. It helped with some of my foot and ankle control. No, I don't really use any of their principles anymore. Every once in a while, an athlete will say they enjoy doing their little, I just call them their TP squats, where they have the two boards. They're doing a goblet squat position. That can be okay for people with knee pain. I've found I rarely use that. So overall, no, I don't really find anything valuable from GOTA. Should you do plyos year-round or only during certain phases like power, strength? Great question. You are going to be doing plyos year-round naturally through playing sports, through having jump sessions, through sprinting and agility work, which you should be doing. Technically, yes, you will be doing plyos all year round. I think it's totally fine to do things like bounding or single leg hops all year round, as long as they're in low to moderate volumes, as long as they're not taking away from your main thing. So they should not be crazy fatiguing with very high volumes. You should be able to do them healthily. Like if plyos are decreasing your health, you can't really do them, or you have to find ways to modulate your training so you can perform them healthily. They can't take away from your jump volume, your sprint volume, your weight room work. They have to be a supplement to your training, a complement to your training, not necessarily the main thing, at least during most of your training phases. As far as shock plyometrics go, like a true depth jump, like a 1 meter depth jump like Verkhoshansky intended, those should only be done sparingly, probably twice a year is how I use them. I use them as a means to intensify my training. I tend to surf the force velocity curve. So the last stop on the force velocity curve is that fast eccentric part. That's where the shock plyos really come into play. In order to do shock plyos multiple times per week while still staying healthy, I have to back off my weight room volume in order to have enough energy to do them and, of course, stay healthy. You can use those as a means to intensify your training. You don't want to do those all year round. I listened to a lecture with Natalia Verkhoshansky, who is Yuri Verkhoshansky's daughter. She mentioned that they had one athlete, I think he was a triple jumper, maybe a long jumper, that he got great results from depth jumps. He was doing depth jumps all year round, or at least through most of his training periods. These are not 18-inch depth jumps. They're high 40, 50-inch box depth jumps. He ended up getting chronic injuries, like chronic knee pain. He had to retire early. Use those sparingly and use them as a way to intensify your training. They can give you some great results. Do you think you can be successful in strength and conditioning without the typical undergrad? There's a ton of examples of coaches. I can't think of any off the top of my head, really. I know there are examples of coaches who did not go to undergrad, or even didn't they went to undergrad but for business or something, and then got into S&C later. Now, I will say you have to have the right connections in order to do that successfully. You have to network and get under the right coaches that will take you under their wing, coaches that you can learn from. You can't just not go to college and think that you can start your own training business. People will come follow you just because you opened up a gym. Maybe that can be the case. And it's also important to remember that you do need your foundational sciences. I think learning science, the science and practice of strength and conditioning is very, very important. That not only helps you develop effective programs, it improves athlete buy-in, it improves your social media presence if you're able to explain the means of why you're doing something. I would say the overall answer is yes and no. I would say no, you don't need to. Should you go to undergrad? Also realize in undergrad, there's a lot more that you need to learn. Going to grad school really opened my eyes to that. going to PT school, that 95% of my learning takes place outside of the classroom. It's what you read in books. It's what you read in research. It's what you learn from coaches who are lecturing or even speaking on social media, or researchers lecturing or podcasts. Like that's where the bulk of your learning should take place from experts in the field. Not necessarily what you learn in the classroom, though that can help supplement and give you the foundational knowledge you need to understand what someone's saying when they're speaking. What's your opinion on Mr. Conk weightless training? He seems to be getting plenty results. I don't follow this guy. I think I do know who you're talking about. He's like a 6'5". I think he's like a high jumper background or track background, like 6'5", skinny guy that jumps really high. He probably jumps like 44 or something. In terms of weightless training, the one thing you got to be careful with this is basically every pro dunker goes through the phase of where they jump pretty much every day until the age of probably like 16. They develop their foundation is in jumping, in playing sports, and being an athlete. They add weight room on top of that after they either hit a plateau or they ran into knee pain and can no longer jump every day. Then they end up, and then the weight room takes them to higher heights. The thing with just doing a bunch of plyos or just doing a bunch of jumping is, one, it's just going to be very, very hard to stay healthy. At some point, you are going to run into knee pain when you jump really high. It's just an inevitable fact. The weight room is what allows you to keep training, to continue to enhance your performance while also keeping you healthy. It gives you structural adaptations like tendon stiffness, like greater muscle cross-sectional area, things that plyos really can't provide you outside of your youth years. I think those plyometric methods can certainly be effective. There's lots of athletes that need to significantly enhance their eccentric capacities, their eccentric rate of force development, and stuff like that to jump higher. Plyos and those plyo training programs will definitely help them. At some point, you have to get stronger. You have to raise your force production ceiling. You can really only do that through weight training. I would say his methods are effective. He obviously jumps high, but at some point he's going to run to a plateau. Maybe he's a guy who had the potential to jump 50 inches. He's also 6'5", 180 or something. So he's super, super light. I just don't think it's feasible for a lot of athletes. They just can't handle those volumes. They're probably not going to realize their actual potential. With this guy specifically, sorry, not to get on a tangent. With this guy specifically, I think he said something like the weight room slows you down. That is true in the short term. It absolutely will fatigue you. You will have days where you jump lower. It does help you in the long term with all of those structural adaptations, all those neural adaptations, accessing more motor units, reducing neural inhibition, probably keeping you healthy and resilient, more importantly. Just be a little cautious of those guys that say, I don't need to use the weight room. I jump high. Look at me. I added 6 inches to my vert when I first started training, yada, yada. So just be careful. Are you really the highest jumping doctor? No, I'm not the highest jumping doctor vert-wise. If I touch 12 foot, I will probably be the highest jumping doctor max touch-wise, which is the record that I'm going for. What's your 40 time? I do know my most recent 40 was like a 5:08 with a 1 yard lead on the laser. Now, translated to what that would be on NFL time would probably be like the 4.9s. I'm also recently found out that my shoes had a big effect on my sprinting performance. I was wearing shoes that were way, way, way too soft. I imagine I'll drop another 10th off my 40. I think here soon, especially as I freshen up because I've been pretty much chronically fatigued for the last 6 months, I think I'll be able to get in that sub 4.8 range relatively soon. And I'm doing more plyos, so my reactive strength will probably increase. I'll run a lot faster because my ACL is not too bad. It's really my max velo that's holding me back. Why should I care about fascicle length? One, it protects your muscles from injury. Sarcomeres, if you add more sarcomeres in series, then each sarcomere does not have to stretch as far for a given muscle stretch. So you can stay more on the plateau region of the force length relationship or the length tension relationship. You can avoid experiencing those high forces while the sarcomeres are on that descending limb, which can lead to the muscle pulls. You will produce more force at a given fascicular shorting velocity, but also helps them remain isometric to get things like a bigger stretch on your tendon. Of course, avoid getting overstretched. Thoughts on hand speed drills for dunking? They're good. They're essential. I don't do a lot of them because I'm not really a professional dunker. When I was trying to hit my first East Bay, I did hand speed drills like 2 or 3 times per week. Definitely low rim dunk and do hand speed drills because they will significantly enhance your hand speed and your coordination. What shoes are you using for training different qualities? I recently got some Nike Waffle 7s, I think they are. They're cross-country shoes. They've been great for sprinting. They feel phenomenal. It's a totally different sprint. It's a totally different stimulus actually now that I'm sprinting because my ground contact times are significantly less because my shoe isn't just mushing into the ground. I use for my drop jumps and my depth jumps, I use the 361 Sport BioSpeed BBs. They're really stiff shoes, so I can get good contacts with those. I use the Nike Romelos for lifting. I just use my normal Brooks for my accessory work. I jump in the Kilgannon shoes, the Game 1 lows. I usually also jump in the 808.5 Ultras too from Wade. Best tips for avoiding injuries: load management and getting really strong. That's just the 2 biggest things. Don't spike your workloads. Make sure you're continually pushing up your strength, which will also increase the capacity of your structure. The other piece of this would be make sure you're practicing your sport consistently and exposing yourself to all of those different vectors, all those different positions, so they're familiar and you're developing proprioception in those specific positions. Can you discuss the difference in adaptation between bilateral and unilateral strength exercises? The structural adaptations will be relatively similar between those. I would say the biggest difference between them is the neuromuscular and the hormonal response. Even though with unilateral strength exercises, they're actually really great for increasing work capacity because you have greater time under tension because obviously you have to do the reps ranges on each leg. So it's probably better for cardiovascular. In terms of hormonal and like a neuromuscular stimulus, bilateral is going to be way better. You're going to have heavier weight in your back. You're going to be able to move the bar faster with higher intent. You have a greater stability. You're going to be probably a little bit less fatigued during the workout itself performing bilateral work. So you're going to have higher quality reps throughout the set. The biggest difference is probably the neuromuscular adaptations. If you want to really drive those up, that's why we use a lot of bilateral lifting in THP. We do some unilateral, especially in our work capacity hypertrophy blocks. Also bilateral just saves time too. In the research, I can say that there's not much difference. There's really not much difference between what translates better to sprinting or jumping or agility, one versus the other. There's slight favors towards unilateral or bilateral for certain categories, but it's not clear cut. What's your advice for those with poor calf genetics? Any tips for maximal calf hypertrophy? Load the bottom range of motion and go close to failure. What should skinny fat guys do to get rid of being skinny fat? If your weight's at a good spot, then you just got to do maintenance calories and train hard 6 days a week, and then you'll recomp. Train the abs just like any other muscle group. Go close to failure, get to longer muscle lengths. As long as you train hard, your diet's pretty good. You're getting 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein. You're eating enough carbs, you'll be good. You just gotta be patient. The best way to increase fast twitch fibers: train explosively. Intense key. How should my diet look on THP strength? We do have a nutrition guide in our school community, so make sure you check that out. Is fascia training possible? Does it have any benefits? So you got to keep in mind that sport is fascia training. I don't really know why they insist on doing these like advanced aerobic type or water aerobic looking cable exercises, lightsaber fight, whatever you want to call them, like mace flows. That's not going to enhance your performance. The only time it enhances, the only reason it gives the perception of that it enhances your performance is because you're always fresh. The weight room no longer fatigues you at all because you're not really doing any real work that lasts to the next day. It's hard in the moment. You recover very quickly from that kind of training. You're able to sprint fast. You're able to jump high. You're able to perform agility with high intent. So that's why fascia training seems to work, because you're able to do the thing at a high level. You're going to run into plateaus, which is why Olympians don't do fascia training. Maybe eventually we'll find a happy medium between fascia training. Traditional S&C has 40 or 50 years of science-backed experimentation on elite population. We know it works. Difference between 1 foot training regarding high jump versus pure dunking. Great question. John Evans would know more about that than I would. The biggest thing is going to be it's just specificity. The specificity with your jump sessions with high jump will be doing high jump. And for dunking, it will be dunking. The weight room volume will look very similar. High jump will typically use a little bit more plyos because you can't get as many takeoffs in a single session with high jump because it's so intense. You're taking 10 steps in a high jump takeoff versus 5 steps in a dunking takeoff. So it's infinitely more intense, which is why in the early season, GPP with high jumpers, usually the way I've seen John program it, the way that I usually program it is you'll prioritize getting 1 foot jump reps over high jump reps because you just need more jump reps as a high jumper. You need to jump off of 1 foot, whether that's over a high hurdle, like John calls it, the grass is growing, jumping over a high hurdle, or just dunking, accumulating jump reps, as well as just maintaining your high jump skill. You can jump off the springboard. You can practice some of your flop technique off a box, stuff like that. The specificity mainly comes from just doing the thing. Is it possible to see a lot of gains in your vertical midseason and as a basketball player? It is. You just got to make sure that you're dosing everything appropriately, that you're not overworking yourself. Like, guys tend to get the mentality of they're in midseason. My vertical seems like it's decreasing. They try to lift 3 times per week. In addition to practicing 5 or 6 times a week, in addition to games, they get just neurally and just structurally just fried, or they'll run into injuries. It's just important to be able to microdose everything that the week. Make sure you're sprinting once per week, getting 1 pretty good lift in that only lasts 30 to 45 minutes, probably 1 feel good lift in, and I recommend 2 15-minute jump sessions a week. As long as everything's high quality, you're making slow, steady progress week to week. You also have the benefit of the adrenaline. So if you're jumping before games, or if you're jumping after practice with your teammates, you'll be in that adrenaline-filled environment and you'll jump even higher. Or if you're lifting with your teammates, you'll be able to push with more intent. There is a lot of players that we work with that end up peaking their vertical mid-season. Sometimes it's because their in-season loads are less than their off-season loads because they're used to doing 50 high-speed A cells and D cells in a single session in their small-sided game work in their off-season. They don't do even near that volume in their practices or in games in season. Sometimes the off-season load ends up being way higher than the in-season load, but it works as like a functional deload, so to speak. Like, I actually got my first East Bay in season my senior year of college. How much should a 170 centimeter 2 foot jumper weigh? How much should they be lifting? I think 170. What is that? 170 divided by 2.67 inches. So like that's what, 5'7", 5'7". 5'7", you want to be around probably 140 to 145 pounds. How much they should be lifting, I assume you mean like how much weight. Heavy weight, man. You got to be pushing probably 2.5x body weight on a squat, probably pushing 1.8 to 2.0 on a power clean. If you're short, you need to be really, really relatively strong relative to your body weight, just because you have to produce so much higher forces to be able to jump higher compared to somebody who is tall. Like someone who is tall, because when you're shorter, here, let me rephrase this. When you're shorter, it's easier to lift a given weight. You're also lighter. Because it's easier to lift a given weight, you have to be relatively stronger so you can match the intramuscular forces that you need to produce to accelerate your limbs at the speeds you need to produce high powers. Whereas if you're taller, you don't need to produce you have to produce higher forces when you're lifting a given weight. Like if I'm 5'8", lifting 200 pounds, I have to produce way less force than a 6'8" person does to lift 200 pounds. Therefore, when you're 5'8", you have to be able to squat a heck of a lot more weight than somebody who's 6'8", because the 6'8" person has to produce so much higher forces. Hopefully that answered your question. Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer. How to easily program conjugate periodization for yourself. Tough. You aren't going to really be able to, I won't say you're not going to be able to do it. You have to go through a conjugate, like a long conjugate sequence system program. Because I assume you're talking about what we do, not like what Westside does. You have to go through it yourself a few cycles to get the hang of it. You can watch all of our YouTube videos. We have lots of videos on it, like on Isaiah's or John's or even my channel. The basis of it is hypertrophy, strength, power, elastic, surfing the force velocity curve, going from concentric to isometric to eccentric to fast eccentric, all the while doing Charlie Francis's vertical integration approach, where you're emphasizing certain qualities while still training other qualities at low volumes to maintain them. It sounds complex on the surface. It's easy to get once you experience what the system is like. You can't really experience what the system is like until you sign up for us, until you sign up for THP. You won't know what it's like until you actually go through a few macro cycles, and it becomes a lot easier to understand. Stu McMillan, who's a coach at Altus, claims that his athletes only lift single leg / split. Bilateral doesn't transfer. Thoughts? Bilateral absolutely does transfer. I can find videos of Asafa Powell or Christian Coleman squatting a lot of weight, or even Usain Bolt squatting quite a bit of weight bilaterally. So bilateral absolutely will transfer. I think what Stu referring to specifically is that there's the claim that single leg training is better for the various fascial networks or fascial slings, which may or may not be true. I don't think I know enough about that yet. I'm actually planning on taking Stu's course. Stu and Danny Foley, shout out Danny, he's really smart. Have a fast fascia course on Altus that I plan on taking soon. So I'll learn more about that. In terms of why they lift single leg or split leg, or single leg or split stance, one, it's because it's supposedly better for your fascia. I would say two, in terms of why they probably see better transfer, is not because of the fascia. It's probably because they're just less fatigued. Like I said earlier, is while single leg work or asymmetric bilateral work feels harder in the moment, you really get your heart rate up, you have a high time under tension, because there's just less overall load on your body. The neurological and the hormonal demand probably is going to be a lot less than doing bilateral with more weight, with probably higher intent. It's a little bit easier to recover from that single leg work because he works with sprinters and jumpers too. You probably see better transfer, similar to a core squat, to where you're just less fatiguing, so you're able to perform your sport at a higher level in that time period. Should I use the same amount of weight on every set for 15 by 1 power cleans? If you're doing EMOMs, if you're just working up to a 1 rep max, then no. I'm 43, I'm an athlete, I sprint twice a week and do plows 3 times a week at a light level. Is this a high risk for Achilles? No, you're actually probably protecting yourself from an Achilles injury. I don't say protect, you're reducing your risk of an injury by doing elastic contacts, because you're maintaining your neuromuscular capacities to prevent excessive ankle dorsiflexion. You're maintaining fast twitch fiber development. The only thing I would add is make sure that you're lifting your calves heavy, doing some sort of overcoming ISO or heavy calf lifting, or even some super maximal eccentrics. That's kind of the missing piece. Sometimes in people's programs, this is not just about plyos for the lower leg. You have to lift the calves to train the calves heavily to increase your tendon stiffness. Best way to increase vertical jump, just follow me and follow John, follow Isaiah. There's a lot of other great coaches that post about it. I can't talk about that here because I talk about it all the time. I don't have a master's or a doctorate. How can I learn relevant knowledge of one for this field? Go to Google Scholar, type in your question, and then read every relevant paper on the topic. And every relevant paper on the topic will also point you towards new papers. You'll go down that rabbit hole. You'll learn a lot. Listen to podcasts with elite coaches. Listen to lectures from elite coaches. Read lots of books. I'm actually reading a lot more books nowadays too. It's been really great. Read Super Training. Read Science of Practice Strength and Conditioning, or Science of Practice of Strength Training. Read Transfer of Training. Read Bombas Periodization. Read Dan Cleather's books. Read Power Plyometrics. Read The Mechanic of Sprinting and Hurdling from Ralph Mann. There's tons and tons of great books out there that you should be reading if you want to become a high-level coach and athlete. Tips on becoming a successful coach in the private sector world. You could say I work in the private sector because I'm an online coach. I don't have a gym, so I don't really know if I can answer that question, because I don't know what it's like to open a gym or anything like that. In terms of growing your page to make it to be successful on an online realm, I made a video on how to grow on Instagram a couple days ago. So check that out. It's on my YouTube. How to learn biomechanics and A&P on your own optimally, similar to what I just said. Go to Google Scholar, or even ask ChatGPT or Perplexity to find sources for you. Ask a question, then go down the rabbit hole. That's what I did. I don't know if many of you know this, but in PT school, I read 1 to 3, maybe even more than that, research papers a day, like every day, in addition to studying for whatever it is I was studying for in PT school, because I was just bored in class. So I would sit in the back of the class and read research. By the time I graduated PT school, I had read easily over 1,000 research papers on a bunch of different topics related to anatomy, to training, and physiology and biomechanics. Read tons of research and read lots of books and listen to the best in the world speak. That's like one of the best quotes I've ever heard. I don't even know who said it. It was like, don't just seek out knowledge from people who know more than you. Seek out knowledge from people who know more than everyone. Don't just go to your local strength coach who has more experience, who obviously will know more than you. Go to a world-class strength coach. That's what I did. I recognized early on that John Evans, who is my mentor, who's the head of THP Strength, he's also my boss, but also my friend, is one of the best strength. He's one of the best performance coaches in the world. He's probably the best jump coach in the world. I started following him in college. I basically made him my mentor, my indirect mentor. And then later I signed up for THB, became an athlete of theirs. I learned under him for 3 years. We about halfway through that, we became friends. He really took me under his wing, taught me everything he knows. We had super long phone calls and text conversations. I learned from him. I knew that he was one of the best in the field. He's who I wanted to ultimately become. I learned from him. And I also learned from guys like Rolf Ullmann. I've talked with Rolf Ullmann in the DMs quite a bit too. I've listened to a lot of his lectures and podcasts. Find mentors, whether that's direct or indirect, is find people that you admire and listen to them, and then listen to them speak, take their courses. I'm always enrolled in at least one course at all times. You'll learn a lot. Just never stop learning. Does dynamic effort increase more speed or strength? Great question. I would say Westside would say it increases strength because you do need to have a high amount of rate of force development to lift more weight. I would say it's better for speed. I think if you want to get strong, rate of force development does play its role. You got to just do the lift. You got to lift heavy to get strong. I think dynamic effort is good for increasing speed. It will translate well to jumping, to sprint acceleration. It's certainly a viable method. I know, what's his name? Peyton Blair, who's a decathlete or a heptathlete from Mississippi State. He trains Westside. He's like pure Westside guy, like through college and I think high school, and he won a natty. So it obviously works well for athletes too. I had an ankle injury 3 months ago. It hurts for a second whenever I jump. Any advice? Just work on your ankle strength. Like you can calf raise as much weight on your right leg as you can your left leg. Make sure you can balance on the ball of your foot. Make sure that you can pronate and supinate. You can even do some manual interventions on your metatarsals to make sure that they can move. See a local physical therapist if you're really having issues. They can probably help you out even more. But that was it, guys. Thank you for attending my first of hopefully many Q&As. So I'll see you next week.